Hello and welcome along to the PPW pod, bringing you news, views and interviews from the real estate marketplace and prop tech industry. I'm Edmund Keith, the editor of onlinemarketplaces.com. Joining me today are Online Marketplaces chairman, Simon Baker. How are you doing, Simon?
I'm very well, Ed. Good to see you.
And delighted to say we are joined on the podcast today by Imran Ali Khan, who is the CEO and co-founder of Dubizzle Group. Now, for those who might not know, Dubizzle Group, formerly known as EMPG, is a Dubai-based online classifieds operator that runs the likes of Dubizzle and Bayut in the UAE and Zameen and OLX in Pakistan. Welcome to the podcast, Imran.
Oh, thank you so much, Ed, and thank you, Simon, for having me on the podcast. Great to see you guys again, and looking forward to the session.
Yeah, great to have another CEO who Simon knows very well on the podcast. I want to start all the way back at the beginnings of Zameen. So I want to know what leads a couple of young entrepreneurs who, if I'm right, were living in London at the time to start a property portal in Pakistan. How did that happen?
Sure. Yeah, happy to share that. So we have three brothers in the company, Heather, Zeeshan, and myself. I think both of you have met all three of us. Zeeshan and I were in London back then, and we graduated from universities, got into a job. This is early 2000s. And the first startup we did wasn't in the property classified space. That was back in 2004, 2005. We did a wholesale goods classified space for the European markets, UK primarily. And exciting days, interesting days, coming out of university, there was a lot of pressure back in the days, peer pressure to get into an investment banking job or some, cool, sexy job. So we had that as well, but then also, jumped ship and did a startup. That did really well. And we were based out of Dubai back then. And that was the cash cow and operating at really good high EBITDA margins, or let's say, net profit margins. And with that, in 2005, we landed in Dubai. We set up our office there. We had our back office in Pakistan for the tech development for this business. And we saw an opportunity, call us, young and stupid back then, but whichever idea we could get, we would sort of try to pursue that, thinking we could go out and do it. So we saw a lot of ideas. One of those was we'd seen Rightmove and all of these property portals, and we'd heard of REA stories. And we saw a gap in the market in UAE and Pakistan. So we started Zameen and Bayut as a sort of a hobby project on the side. And we just let it simmer. We had a small team on it. At the same time, we had an ice cream shop. We had a gym. These were investments we were making, right, from the profits coming from this cash cow. We had a distribution company for HEPA filters. You see a lot of, health conscious folks now sort of talking about air quality, but, we thought we got there early and there would be a market for it. I think there was a market for everything, but we were doing too much. And then if I fast forward all the way to 2012, we had 10 different businesses. We realized, and slightly less stupid and less young by 2012, Zeeshan and I sat down and we said, look, we can't do everything. We really have to focus. And Zameen and Bayut had organically grown in that era to become known brands. They'd grown organically with some content listings, and the flywheel has started spinning somewhat. And that's when we decided, okay, let's just do these two property portals. So it's the same product, but two markets. That's 2012. And that's kind of the genesis of, I would say, where we started focusing on these portals full time, between Zeeshan, myself, and the third brother, Heather. He was in the US. He'd gone there earlier on to study in the US. He stayed there for 20 years. And in 2013/14, somehow convinced him to come back closer to the region. He landed in Dubai in 2014, and he started leading the Bayut initiative in the UAE.
Yeah,
so he made many mistakes, and I'm happy to share those.
Yeah, Imran, I got a couple of questions. When you're running, these 10 or so businesses, you're sort of being super entrepreneurial. You see these opportunities everywhere. How did you think about, why would you go into other opportunities rather than doubling down on the one that's super successful, the cash cow? So why expand versus just milking that harder and running it better? And then when you found yourself in 10 different businesses, why then narrow it back down again? What were the core reasons for doing that?
So the core business was doing about 70 to 80% EBITDA margin in the early days. And as young entrepreneurs, financially independent, we believed we could do a lot more. As this is, I think, youth sort of drives that in people, right? And I'm sure maybe a lot of us, we've been through
superhuman. There's nothing you can't do in the
process.
There's
everything we can do, and sort of Superman trying to do everything. And I think it becomes it becomes a question of focus, right? Because there's every business, even a small business, targeting, let's say, one product, one set of audience in one market, that can take a lot of attention. That does take a lot of attention. And we've learned it over the years. Even doing, let's say, a property portal in a small country, from a population point of view or a market point of view, that does take away a lot of management bandwidth, tech bandwidth. Every business has some sort of nuances which you have to cater to. Every day is a firefight. And yeah, that's the reason why we got into it. We thought we could do it. And what happened, therefore, was we had passive investments in some businesses like the gym and a few other sort of areas. And just keeping an eye on that and driving efficiencies is very, very difficult. And over that period from 2004, 2005 to 2012, the cash cow, the core business, which was giving 80% EBITDA margin, was down to 10%. Why? Because we were not focusing on it. And by that time we were, I would say, fortunate enough to realize that and sat down and said, okay, we can only do one thing. We cannot do 10. And by that time, we had a large team as well. And I would say even with a large team, one cannot just go out there and do 10, 15 different things.
Yep. Can we dive a little deeper into the Zameen business? Because that sort of came a little bit before the UAE business. And when you go into the Zameen business, one of the things that I remember from the early Property Portal Watch conferences going, I don't know, way back to probably 2010, 11, 12, is that when you guys were presenting and talking about it, you didn't think about it just as being an advertising vehicle. You thought of it more about as a sort of an end-to-end vertically integrated building, business that could go from helping generate leads to actually building buildings and finance and so on. So how did that all start? And then how did you think about that vertical integration?
Sure. So when we started Zameen as a full-time thing in 2012, Zeeshan and I realized that we could not stick to convention and stick to the convention from the Western model, because a lot of the agencies over here, they did not even have computers or smartphones with them. And to get the flywheel spinning, the flywheel, the classifieds flywheel, where you get the content, the listings, that brings in the audience. Once the leads flow back to the agencies, then agencies want to be on the platform, which has all the audience. So we had to go after the agencies, and we had to do a lot. And we had to sort of get our engineering sort of, hats on to start sort of solving these problems via apps, via SMS messages. We even had folks going out on motorcycles to these agency offices to capture the listings, and even taking pictures ourselves. And we realized we had to do that, but at the same time, we had to monetize the business as well. Free has no value. I think those were the early lessons we learned from folks like yourself, Simon, and Gio, and a few others, that we had to monetize the space as well. So we went for these annual packages, subscription packages, and get the content onto the platform. And Pakistani landscape was very fragmented from an agency point of view. There was no Coldwell Banker, Foxtons, there were no XML fees, as I said. We ended up developing these solutions for agencies. We ended up, being their partners in success. Our SaaS solution was very different, or quite different from a typical SaaS solution we would see in the Western markets. It was catered to the local audience from a pictures point of view, from listings point of view, WhatsApp or chat enabled, SMS enabled, email enabled as well. So once we got the listings from these agencies, we started monetizing the classified space. This is your pure classifieds 1.0 model. And soon after that, we realized that a lot of these agencies, they were not participating in the off-plan sales, new developments, new builds. And the reason for that is, let's say if you're a developer and you have a new project coming up with 500 units, that project is going to sell locally, right? That's also going to sell across different cities and also to diaspora. And a lot of our markets have a huge diaspora abroad. And as a developer with 500 units, it becomes very challenging to work with 500 or 100 different agencies. As I said, there's no large franchise to go to like CBRE or Knight Frank in these markets, or at that time, they didn't exist in most of our markets. So in Pakistan, we saw that opportunity. We went to developers. We said, okay, we have the agencies on our platform. We can be this gateway where all of your off-plan units can be in our SaaS solution. We have the agencies there already, and we will enable agencies to sell the stock. So that's where the transactionality, or let's say the integrated services, came in, and we started enabling off-plan sales through the platform. And today we take about 12% of the property value as a take rate across different services. So it's not just, let's say, commission. It's a SaaS solution as well. It's a demand embedded engine, because we have all the traffic on the platform, so we can also provide leads for these units as well.
Because I remember in the early days, you having some very good stories about, and a couple of dimensions. One is around sort of dealing with a very large sales team, because I assume one of the challenges of working in a market that's highly fragmented is that you need to have a very big team working for you. If you're going out there and doing everything from taking photos to verifying that an actual property exists, through to dealing with hundreds of real estate agents who are probably not paying as frequently as they should. How did you go about managing your sales team? Because that's quite a challenge, right? And I assume it was a large sales team, especially in a market that's probably that may probably throw up a few challenges in making sure they're even turning up for work.
Yeah, so sales is always a challenge, and it's the most important problem to solve. I would say, the engineering background helped us to do that, because when you start scaling your sales team, 6, 7, 10, 15, 20 people, one can always manage. But when you go across different cities and you go to a larger team and the larger sort of, let's say, depth infrastructure, then you do need systems. These policies have to go into the systems. And we started using Salesforce as the go-to CRM in the early days. And you realize that wasn't going to work for our sales agents. So we developed our own CRM. And the kind of things we had to do, if I give you a few examples, in the early days, our salespeople would come back to the office in the evening and say, hey, I did 10 meetings. And you get the sales funnel, right? You did 10 meetings, maybe you get sort of, 2 opportunities out of that, and you convert 1. So they had to go out and meet agencies and build relationships. With a large sales team, at one point, I think we had 300 salespeople in Pakistan, just going out and selling classifieds packages to agencies. Unfortunately, a lot of the salespeople, they would just make up stories about these meetings. They just wouldn't go and do the meetings. They would just lie about it and fake meetings, fake notes in there. And in our CRM, this is pre 3G in the country. We spoke with the telco provider, and they would do triangulation with their sort of, telecom antennas, and they would give us a location of our salespeople, because they were using company phones, company cell phones, company numbers. We could do that. We embedded that into our CRM. And when we started doing that, we realized one guy went and sat in a cinema for 3 hours and reported meetings in that time period. Another guy went to a different city for the whole day, was gone for 10 hours, right? And apparently did 6 meetings in that day. So those were the kind of challenges we had to solve and put everything into the system to drive sales. Even now, I think if you look at our CRMs, the morning meetings you do in sales, there's a template within the system, and that has to be filled. So it cannot just be, say, yes, I did my morning meeting. There's a lot more depth to it. Now, I'm going to use the A word now. So we use a lot of AI in that as well. So I know you hear a lot about AI. We can maybe talk about that in a bit. But yes. Yeah, so it's been a pretty interesting journey, and we've solved sales with an engineering mindset and engineering background by tech.
So you had to really solve a bunch of problems around from sales, marketing, etc., in a highly fragmented and a little bit chaotic market. I always remember you mentioning a story years ago about how you took the data that you were generating around demand for new developments and helped feed that back to the developers themselves. What are some of the sort of war stories you had around that?
Yeah, so again, I think we see a lot of, I would say, new developers or first, second, third project developers. For a lot of these developers, these projects become passion projects. They're very close to their hearts. And again, not very, I would say, data-driven perhaps. So we started collecting a lot of demand and sharing a lot of data with developers. We've monetized that product now in Pakistan at least. And we did the same business model in Indonesia successfully, in Mexico as well, and in Thailand. And there's a need for this, right? Because when you go to a developer and if they're building a 4-bed apartment, but our platform suggests that there are only 1-bed apartment searches in that neighborhood or studio searches, then they need to sort of ingest that data into their model and perhaps, rework their own floor plans and think about it. So we partner with developers in some of these sort of markets, or we were doing this in Indonesia as well, where we would get in there on day one, right? And get there before they even start planning what they're going to build. At the end of the day, if you have this sort of, let's say, disparity between the product you're offering and what the market needs, then they'll struggle. And they need to sell. They need to sell quickly to get financing, to build the cash flows.
Okay. And I guess if what I'm hearing out of all of this is that you've plunked yourself in the middle of the ecosystem. That if possible, Zameen touches all parts of the value chain in some way, and that you're able to then capture some value on the way through. If you think about that, and the ecosystem sort of almost being created around you and going through you, is that driven by just a lot of hard work? Is there an element of being in the right place at the right time? Is there an element of Pakistan being a large, hundreds of millions of people, but from an outside in perspective, you're not getting a lot of competition coming in, so you were just in the right place? How do you think about that? Here we are, probably about 12, 14, 15 years later.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's a bit of everything. And hard work for sure. There's a lot of hard work in here, right? And I think one has to roll up the sleeves and get in there. I think some ways we have a sort of a tale of two cities here, right? One was in Pakistan, in Lahore, where Zeeshan and I were plugged in, trying to build Zameen. And then Heather was in Dubai building out Bayut. And both the markets had a different competitive mix. They had a different dynamic as well to these markets. One, I would say, definitely closer to the European standards. The other one, more emerging. And sure, timing always matters. One can call it luck or timing, hard work as well. And at the end of the day, we just try to solve problems for our users, right? We're fully focused on the users. We try to solve those problems. Those users, people who use the platform, but also the agencies. We have to help them succeed. If they succeed, we build that relationship, and hopefully at some point the revenue start growing as well. But they do grow, and they grow sort of handsomely. So it's been a bit of everything. I think where people or young entrepreneurs sort of lose the plot. I've seen quite a few of them. They go into self-branding fairly early, right? They would, let's say, get some sort of achievement level and then start branding themselves, wasting a lot of time in not just branding, but also sort of just not focusing on the core idea. We'd learned from our first business that we have to really, really focus on one thing, and if that's classified, let's just go after it. 100% or 200% or 1,000,000%, just fully focused on the opportunity set itself. And when we talk about competition in Pakistan, we did get some competition in the early days from Rocket Internet. That was more of a copy-paste model, right? Sticking to the standard convention and just roll that out. What we decided to do was, okay, we're not going to sort of look at the competition every day. We're just going to set our own goals and try to sort of, achieve that goal month on month, day on day, year on year. And that's what we did. I just feel if you start looking sideways or backward or looking at different sort of things competition is doing, then you do lose. You kind of lose the plot, right?
Yeah, you lose your focus.
In the UAE, that was a sort of a bit of a red ocean when we started in 2014. And then by 2020, we took leadership position in traffic and all of the metrics. That's when we acquired Dubizzle and OLX assets in the MENA region. So again, I would say over there as well, different story in terms of the challenges we had, but again, a lot of hard work went into that as well.
So I want to get onto Dubai in a second, because it's now the Dubizzle Group and where you're going with that. But I'm curious around geopolitical impact. I mean, we've all read about some of the challenges within Pakistan, the role of the changing political landscape and so on. How has that impacted the business?
Sure. So we've sort of grown in the same environment as well, the business, 2012 onward. We saw a lot of political challenges in 2013, then again in 2018. And Pakistan tends to go through this up and down cycle, right? 4 years down cycle, 4 years, say good days. And I would say this one is probably sort of a bit more intense than the previous ones in terms of we have a political challenge as well as an economic / forex deval challenge as well. So that has been around, and that sort of, I would say we've been going through it for the last 1.5 to 2 years. We've had elections in Pakistan and things seem to be moving in the right direction. I would definitely say we've sort of bottomed out on that front. From a business point of view, 2022, we did close to 60 million US in revenues. Business was profitable. And in a down cycle, then one just holds down the fort. And the idea again is to stay break even and hold down the fort. And as we bottom out and as the market comes back, then we hopefully stand to benefit from it.
Yep. And I guess the good news is that, and we've seen this in markets around the world with like Rightmove in the UK and REA Group in Australia, that the 20 years of hard work and brand building creates a place in someone's in the community psyche. And I guess what you're playing here is that Zameen is deeply embedded in the Pakistani way of life. In everyone knows the brand, and that when the market does come back, you will then be at the forefront. Do you feel like there'll be more competitors when the market starts to come back, or do you think that or are those competitors, if there are any, likely to be internal, as in from within Pakistan, and you're not too worried about that, just purely because of all the hard work you've done over the previous 15 or so years?
So I think it's if you sort of look at, to your point, right? These brands take a long time to build, and to become a culturally significant brand, it takes a long time. It takes anywhere from 5 to 8 years. I was having a chat with one of the first marketing teams of Leboncoin in France, and they believe that it takes 8 years to build that top of mind, culturally significant brand where you become a part of the culture. You start seeing it in sort of day-to-day language as well. People would sort of start talking about that brand. Let's say we Google it, or REA in Australia is a culturally significant brand. Everybody knows it. Kids also know it. Let's say in the early teens, they will start experiencing or hearing about that brand name. So I think for any new competition to come in, it's going to take a long time, first of all, to get that sort of, let's say, brand equivalence, at least 5 years, I would say. And again, there will always be competition. Right? There are always competitors, be it long tail or well capitalized. At the end of the day, we just stay focused on our goals. If we achieve those, then we hopefully land in a good place.
I want to talk quickly about. So I've got some data somewhere from a study I did a couple of years ago that suggests that real estate portals, or at least market-leading real estate portals in developing markets, are twice as likely to have some kind of like foreign investment or foreign ownership. Now, we had a very interesting story from one of your competitors in the UAE about what happened with their ownership over the years. I think I'm right in saying in about 2012, you attracted some outside capital. I'm wondering why you did that and what the effect on the business was, especially given that you said you had these other businesses that were generating, as you said, they were cash cows.
Yeah, so interesting story behind that as well. So we were financially independent and we were financing this initiative ourselves. Zeeshan and I, we were in a comfortable place, I would say. Well, that's a kind of a moving target, right? Comfortable place, because that every time you reach that, then you move the target, that line ahead of you. But one day we were sitting in the office, and Zeeshan and I shared an office for about 12 years, 13 years, the same office. Our desk was sort of, we just tag team a lot and use each other as a sounding board. And one day I just got this message on LinkedIn, which I thought was half French, half English. And I looked at Zeeshan and I said, look, I have this message from some French site called Siloger. I didn't even know how to pronounce it. I said Siloger, probably. And I wasn't quite sure what the guy wanted. And I thought the guy was asking me for a link exchange. Back SEO back in the days was a lot about link exchange. And I just picked up my phone. I called him, and that was Gio from Siloger, one of the founders of Siloger. Siloger is a French property portal, started on the Minitel system even before the web. And started speaking with Gio. They just sold the business to Axel Springer, and he was heading their M&A efforts. And they said they wanted to invest. So that was the first discussion we had. But in the end, Gilles invested as an angel investor. Why we took that money was for, I would say, mentorship experience, because we learned that, yes, sure, you can get there on your own as well, but it's going to take a long, long, long time to get there. So let's just rely on other people's experience. So I would say Gilles came on board for his experience and also his network as well. The first thing which Gilles did after the angel investment he made, it wasn't a lot, but it was, again, I would say significant, but the most value was in the experience and the network. The first thing he did was he said, hey, you're going to this conference next month, right? So we're not debating the budget or anything. And that was in San Francisco, and that was Property Portal Watch. So that's where we went. He introduced us to Simon. He introduced us to the whole industry. We learned so much from the guys in Brazil, Brian, Ricard, Lucas. Again, globally, we just spoke with everyone. And we had no shame in reaching out to people and asking for advice, help. We didn't take all of the opinions and advice and implemented that in our market. But again, just learning from experience and then curating that to your market, that really works. So it was for experience.
Let's roll the clock forward a bit. You had Zameen, that then became EMPG, and now is the Dubizzle Group. So as you've sort of moved from Pakistan to Dubai as the core focus, what's behind that? And let's talk about the growth of the business within Dubai.
Sure. So Dubai, Heather came in from the US and took over the business, started growing that. And at that stage, I would say up until 2012, 13, Dubizzle was the go-to platform for everything. We didn't own Dubizzle for all that we call Dubizzle Group now. It was a go-to platform for properties, for cars, for general goods marketplace as well. And Dubai is a very transient market. A lot of people, sort of come enter Dubai every year. A lot of people leave as well. It's an expat heavy market. So Dubai is very, very relevant from that point of view. Dubizzle is very relevant from that point of view. When I say Dubai, again, I'm talking about the whole country here, UAE as well, obviously. So property space was a very intense battle, I would say, in the sense that Dubizzle was there, Property Finder was growing, we were growing. I would say users needed new solutions and more sort of, let's say, data quality had to improve, where Dubizzle sort of went into a slow mode or a deep slumber, perhaps, which left the gap for other places to grow. Property Finder grew in the same time, we grew. There were some other platforms as well. There was Just Rentals, there was Wiser. And by 2019, we overtook in traffic terms. Dubizzle had lost that position in real estate, although autos had continued to be the market leader. Sort of consolidation, I believe they were speaking with everyone. It made the most sense for us to consolidate, get to that 60% market share position in the UAE in the real estate category. Made sense to process as well, and that's when we consolidated that opportunity. Also, at the same time, we acquired their classifieds businesses in the larger region, MENA in Pakistan, OLX in Egypt, OLX in GCC, also OLX in Pakistan as well. For us, that was sort of our foray into the horizontal space, general goods, autos category. UAE, ever since, has been the largest market for us from a revenue point of view, from a focus point of view, naturally as well. And with the leadership position in cars, in real estate, in general marketplace, there's a lot to be done over there. So UAE is definitely the focus area. There is a sort of a story of why we went into Southeast Asia and what happened with that. We've discussed that before as well with the Modi acquisition just before we acquired the UAE business. Happy to jump into that, perhaps, and maybe I'll try to sort of keep it brief, just in the interest of time. Yeah, so maybe I'll just take a step back and explain how we sort of got into the Southeast Asian region, because we've been doing Dubizzle and we have businesses in Southeast Asia and Indonesia, Philippines, even Mexico, by the way. What happened before this Dubizzle acquisition was a few months before that, we'd acquired the Modi business. And as you'd appreciate, these transactions do take a long time. They take 6 months, 12 months of negotiation and discussions. And we saw a good opportunity in those markets because that was, again, a pretty close fit to the playbook we had developed for emerging markets in Pakistan. And we acquired Kaidi in Thailand. We acquired Modi with these 3 markets, started investing in those businesses. And that was, again, lots of challenges there in terms of management, people management, strategy as well. Tech we solved because we had a single stack running across all geographies, which we scaled into those regions as well. That was the easier one for us to solve. But from a business point of view, those businesses started growing beautifully from literally like low single-digit revenues. In Indonesia, we were doing mid-teens in millions of dollars. Southeast Asia as a whole was doing close to $30 million, but still very early stage businesses and requiring a lot of attention and burning as well, because they required a lot of investment to sort of grow. Personally, for me as well, in terms of challenges, I remember having a discussion on Mexico, and the very next call would be on Philippines, and the very next call would be on Indonesia. And it was torturous mentally to offload all of that information and then upload the new information, that context switching. I remember one day I was having a chat with my wife, and I said, for the first time ever in my life, I was having a chat with the Mexican business and had forgotten something we had discussed a week before. And I said, look, you know what? Actually, I remember all the Netflix shows I've been watching. So how come I remember those and not that? And I stopped watching television altogether. And it's been a year and a half. I haven't seen a lot of TV, but just to sort of conserve that hard disk space. So, yeah, we had good businesses growing overall. It was very challenging from many sort of dimensions. But then eventually we decided to divest out of those markets to focus more on the core markets in the GCC plus region. 2 reasons, geographic fit. And then secondly, focus, obviously. Geographic fit / focus. And the stage of the business was also very different. Early stage versus mature stage.
Yep. What's the within the UAE, which is clearly the core value driver? What's the underlying model? Is it a transaction model? Is it an advertising model? What are you doing in those markets?
So we have three verticals, more than three, but let's just focus on three key ones, right? Real estate is a pure classifieds play in the UAE, and we service the agencies. We drive a lot of leads, traffic to the agencies. Typical model you would see with, let's say, Rightmove or REA, and that's a pure play classifieds model.
And why is that? Is that because in the UAE, the transaction model that you have in Pakistan wouldn't work, or it would upset too many people, or it's, the model that you have is just profitable enough? What is it?
So UAE, from the agency point of view, is not as fragmented, and all of these agencies are professionally run. They understand marketing ROIs. They already work with developers. They sell a lot of off-brand stock as well. So I would say that problem has been solved by agencies already in the UAE. So we don't need to go in and solve that problem for them. And therefore we just, focus on delivering traffic and leads to the agencies to drive their businesses. So it's a different lay of the land from, I would say, an early stage nascent market like Pakistan or even Southeast Asian markets, where you have a lot of fragmentation, but also I would say professionalism level of the agencies as well. Both of those factors play in. And UAE, that's a real estate play, pure classifieds. In the autos category, again, Dubizzle is the go-to platform for cars. And that sort of works really well for us. On the cars front, we do have some added services because it's all about solving problems for the user. If a user comes on our platform and they don't have the time to go and sell their car, as an example, let's say, Simon, you're a busy guy. You come on the platform, you don't want to take all the phone calls. We have a concierge service for you. So we would sort of take those calls and assisted sale. That itself is for a select audience who need that service. If you need to auction your car, you can put that on the platform. That auction will go on to the car dealers. They can bid on that. So we have all of those integrated services, but classifieds is predominantly it's a classifieds cars business, the pure play classifieds. And then finally, on the goods category, the marketplace category, which is typically for all classifieds platforms, that tends to be a traffic driver and a brand builder. It's very difficult to monetize a cell phone being sold for $100, right? How do you sort of charge for that? And it's not being sold mostly by car dealers or agencies, so you can't have a recurring subscription model. So with that, what we tend to do is we again, try to capture the content, drive traffic, build into other categories, and we monetize them over there. So Dubizzle itself gets half of the population of UAE on the platform every month, does really well in all three categories. Bayut leads on the real estate side because at times people do want a deeper experience in real estate. So Bayut tends to do really, really well in real estate.
Okay, so when you think about the future, the role of AI, etc., how is that going to change how you do business?
Sure. Maybe I'll share very quickly some thoughts on AI. I have a technical background. I'm a computer scientist by qualification. We set up our first AI lab back in 2016, and we've done a lot of AI work across three key dimensions. That's our vision, right? So one is for sales efficiency. We develop a lot of tools, technology. Second is on operational side, i.e. cost efficiency. So the first one drives revenue, sales. Second one on cost/operations. And third is user experience. So we've been doing it since 2016. And I would say we see AI as an enabler rather than a revolutionary technology for the classified space. AI as a whole, I think there's a hype cycle right now. I believe it's become almost a fad in so many ways. I was at a conference recently, a tech conference, and 70% of the startup stalls, they had something about AI in there. Right? And I was like, guys, okay, that's great, but what's your business? What do you do? Because it was like all that text was all about AI. For me, I think if any tech outfit doesn't have AI, they're going to get left behind. But it's an integral part of every tech outfit, but that's not what the business is. It's like saying, hey, I have a tech company and I have a database. Sure, you have AI, but what do you do? So I think AI is going to probably change the face of search engines, maybe. It's going to change the face of the security industry with AI versus AI dogfights in security areas, maybe pharma/medtech. But classifieds, I think it's likely to stay, there's a need. We have to deliver leads. It's going to bring a lot of efficiency. We launched Bayut GPT in the UAE, which was world's first multimodal, including ChatGPT, multimodal powered search engine/search assistant. I think the way we look at AI is going to help us capture the intent of the user really well. So we can capture the intent perhaps faster and more efficiently. Property portals do a good job at capturing intent, and it's pretty easy in the property sector to do that. And then AI also helps us service the right listings to the customers, not just on their search results page, but also recommendations, push notifications. So we use a lot of that. Pricing as well. We do dynamic pricing with some sort of, AI powering all of that. Overall, I see that as a catalyst, as an enabler for the property sector to deliver, I would say, high quality leads to agencies. In some areas, if quantity reduces, but quality improves, that's good for agencies, that's good for the platforms as well.
Okay. So I see you're the same side of the enthusiasm fence on AI that I am. I want to go back to the UAE for a moment. We spoke about Zameen in Pakistan, and maybe there's not a huge amount of very strong competition there. But in the UAE, there is strong competition, especially in real estate from Property Finder. I'm interested at the moment, who is taking market share from whom, if you're allowed to say that, and what do you think will be the deciding factor on their emerging a really dominant player of the two? Because both you and Property Finder claim you're the market leader. I'm not really sure who is. Eventually, logic says there will be a very dominant market player. Who do you think it will be? Obviously, you think it will be you, but what do you think the deciding factor will be there?
So I think on leadership, I've been to a lot of property portal watch conferences with Simon, and you do get this, I remember from India and from other markets, Brazil, everybody would come and claim to be the leader. And then, people would claim leadership in different metrics. So we're
starting Property Portal Watch bingo with certain phrases. One of them being adjusted EBITDA positive, another one being it depends how you define market leadership. Yeah. These phrases, you're right, everyone says these phrases.
So for us, I think one true metric is revenue. And we have a very good idea of every player's revenue in our market, and we are the leaders in the revenue area, obviously. And traffic, we have a larger share than the revenue share. So again, depends how you want to slice it or cut it, but we look at revenue and we are the larger player. I think Property Finder has been in the market and they have grown, as did Bayut. And then consolidation happened for us to sort of, get larger eyeball share, market share. So long term, I think what has happened over the last few years is there have been strong tailwinds in the UAE real estate market with a lot of transaction growth, lots of commission pool growth. And when that happens, then obviously everyone stands to benefit. And once I would say the time comes when, let's say, agencies would pay more attention to the ROIs in terms of the leads being provided and the conversion rates as well, then I'm very, very sure we stand to benefit a lot more at that stage.
Yeah. I'm also going to challenge you a bit, Ed. I'm not convinced that this is a winner-takes-all scenario. I mean, you can be Domain in Australia and you're doing, I think it's 300 million revenues and 100 million plus in EBITDA. Well, if I was doing 100 million profit cash in my bank every year, I would not be that upset. Okay, so you can be. I think the overall markets have grown to an extent that they can now have very sustainable duopolies. They can have very sustainable, clear leader, but actually a profitable number two. And there's no reason why that can't be in Dubai, where if it's Dubizzle Group ahead of Property Finder, and we've seen in Italy where the leaders changed 3 times, okay, over the years. It's just about execution, but it doesn't mean that the number 2 in that market has disappeared. It just means that they have found a way to which there's competition. Okay, so I think that at the end of the day is actually good for the industry as a whole. It's good for the companies because it keeps them on their toes and running forward at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And one could argue that the right moves of the world have sort of, sitting on their 75% EBITDA margin. They wake up, they put their prices up 5-10% each year and go back to sleep. And now they've got real competition and now they're being put on their toes. Whereas I think, the innovation that Imran's talking about in terms of AI, etc., is driven by competition. You've got to deliver better results for your customers if you want to be able to push through price increases or get them to buy new products. So I'm not convinced.
Simon, fully agree with you on that one, right? And I think we just focus on our own goals, delivering better leads, high quality leads, conversions, developing technology for our customers, clients, agencies, as well as users at the same time. And just continue to provide value and value comes back to us as well at some point then.
So sorry, you go ahead.
So we've probably got time for maybe 2 more questions, and we'll get the question that I know is going to have a stock response out of the way because it needs to be asked. There has been talk about an IPO to kind of release value in the company. What's the latest on that?
So I would say just like any large company, which let's say, when I say large, again, that can have multiple definitions, but let's say doing close to a couple of $100 million in revenues, profitably growing the business. At that stage, one has to create all options for shareholders, right? That could be via dividends in the future, that could be via IPO or strategic process. So we do a lot of internally as a CEO, as co-founders, it's our duty to get the company ready for all options and continue working towards that. And then at times, we do hear stuff in the news or the press. So at the end of the day, it's just about being ready for all options at all times, just like any large company would do all the time.
Okay, fair enough. Handle with a straight bat. The other thing, go on, Simon. What was
for me, I was thinking about, you've been in the industry 15 plus years, probably a bit more now, 20 years, I guess, if we think about it. Looking back, what would be and if you were talking to your younger self as a highly entrepreneurial person, opening the 10 different things from gyms to ice cream stores to a property portal, clearly there's a clear link between them somewhere. What would be the 3 things that you would say to yourself to actually give a better outcome at the end of the day?
Sure. Less is more. So that's to do more with focus and paying full attention to one business. I think you can get it to a really, really large point. So we had that in the early days, Zeeshan and I, when we sort of started doing a lot of this sort of, let's say, I wouldn't say spray and pray. This was all calculated investments. Every single idea had a lot of potential in it, but just focusing on one, gets you a much larger pie. And then even if you have a small piece of it, that's fine. That's good enough. And then one enjoys that more as well, right? Just solving these problems and challenges every day. Secondly, definitely learn from other people's experiences a lot more. I think we did a fair bit of that, Simon, at your conferences. And again, I do remember jumping on a lot of calls with you as well. I would say in terms of building the early cap table, when we did, so Gilles was the first angel investor, but after that, we were almost very close to doing a round where we were to almost raise money from 9 industry leading leaders, entrepreneurs, people who had developed these large platforms in Europe, Australia, US. And instead of that, we went with 1 investor. So I would say, if I could go back in time, I'd change that and have these 9 people helping out, or 7 people helping out of that club of 9 and getting access to their network. So that's the second one I would definitely sort of say I'd sort of change. Third, I just go back in time and tell myself to read more because, when it gets really, really busy, I don't read enough. So I like reading. I enjoy reading. So I just, one thing I think I just got to read more and at the same time, spend more time with family. I think that's a key thing for me. I have, wife, 3 kids, and my work life over the last 3-4 years has been a lot of travel. So just spending more time with family. I just changed that perhaps.
That's a wonderful place to end it. We've hit 45 minutes. We'll leave it there. Imran, thank you very much for joining us. It's been really great talking to you. And there's a lot of other things that we'd love to talk to you about, but we'll maybe leave it for another time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Edmund. Thank you for having me, Simon. Pleasure seeing you guys as always.
Thanks, Imran.